G'day guys, and welcome back to the Red Vest podcast. This week, we're joined by Lukey Power. Luke had an illustrious career, playing 302 games at the Brisbane Lions and GWS Giants, being a part of the three-peat Brisbane side that won 3 premierships in a row, 01, 02, 03, being a 2004 All-Australian, being a foundation GWS player, and now moving into his coaching career at the AIS Academy and also at the Carlton Blues. We hope you guys enjoyed this one as much as we did. It was an absolute cracker, and we can't thank Lukey enough for his time. Stick around, and as always, stay tuned. Yeah, that's right, guys. We're back with episode 11 here, and this time we're joined by a 3-time premiership Lion, a 300 gamer, and an All-Australian in Luke Power. Luke, how are you, mate?
Good, Connor. Thanks for having me.
No worries, mate. It's a pleasure to have you on. Like we do with all our shows, we're going to start off with the introduction into your career and a bit about yourself. How did you get into footy in your juniors, and how did you work your way into the AFL?
Grew up in Melbourne. I remember at 18 months, I had a pretty serious accident where I put my finger or hand into a swimming pool generator, into a swimming pool fan, and went to hospital and had to have multiple operations on my hand. And I remember getting my first football in hospital at my first Sharon at 18 months of age, and just loved everything about it. The smell of the Sharon, and fell in love with the game. As a result, my parents, my dad was an amateur footballer down in Melbourne, played in the VAFA down here, and mum also loved the game, which helped. And I had 2 brothers, and as a result of that first footy in hospital, I just fell in love with the game ever since. Then I followed my older brother down to the Ball and Tigers Footy Club, which was around the corner, and played down there till under 16s, and then graduated through the Oakley Chargers system. Played school footy in the AGS competition for Trinity Grammar, and then was fortunate to get drafted in my year 12 my final year at school, and went to a club that was at an interesting space. It had just merged. The merger between the Brisbane Bears and the Fitzroy Lions had just happened, and there was a bit of instability, and obviously a few different factions from the merger for both sides. And basically what happened was we had 2 coaches in my first year. We had John Northey and then Roger Merritt. And then after that, Lee Matthews came in and just put everyone on the same page, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Yeah, that's it, man. And I always ask this to people who, I asked Shermo when he came on the show for the first time about the move interstate to play professional football. What was that like for you? And also, what was it like coming into the foundation of, I guess, Brisbane Lions as a club? Was it exciting? Were you a bit nervous about how it would go? Do you want to give us a run through of that?
It was interesting. Obviously, it really helps that a lot of the players, and Justin went through this too when he came to Brisbane. A lot of the players come from interstate, so going interstate, you become like family for each other. And I guess while there are the challenges of being away from your major support network, you rely on each other a lot, and you form a really close bond. And I guess at times there are also probably less distractions. We've all got great mates who probably have different priorities in their life. When we start our footy career, they don't have the responsibility of having to prepare themselves mentally and physically to play AFL footy week in, week out. So, going out on Wednesday and Thursday nights for them is just something that's part of their life. And obviously, as a professional player, you can't do that. So it probably does take away a few of those distractions. The club was great in how they supported young players. We had really good senior leaders at the club who spent a lot of time with us. I remember Andy Gowers, who was a premiership player for Hawthorn in 1991, was my big brother, and I'd constantly be around at his his house for dinner, and the duty of care that he showed for me was terrific. And also people at the club, like Shane Johnson, who was our player development manager, really, really looked after players and made sure that, they acclimatised to the Queensland environment pretty early.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And did you struggle at all with that interstate move? I know Shermo was a bit of a mummy's boy. How'd you go with the move, mate? Were you all good?
I would have been 8 times as bad as Shem. I was from a very close family. I've said I had 2 brothers, and we're very close. I consider them probably to be my best mates in life. So to be pulled away from them, especially my younger brother, Sam, who is now the current list manager at the Western Bulldogs and played for the Bulldogs and North Melbourne. I reckon he was about 13 or 14 when I went away as a 17-year-old. So to leave him at that stage and miss out, on a massive period for his development, was pretty tough at times. And yeah, early days battled a bit. Tended to battle a lot more when I wasn't getting a game in the seniors because you feel like you're in Brisbane and you've left your family and friends to go and achieve something. And when you're not achieving what you've set out to, albeit you need to be patient, obviously, when you go into a senior footy environment, you can tend to get a bit down and, a bit become a bit insular because, you're not doing what you're there to be able to do.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about a few of the influences you had in some of the older guys at the club. Was there a lot of players from, I guess, the time you were successful at Brisbane that had a real big impact on your career? Did you take certain approach to every game from the likes of, you say, your Michael Vosses and all those sorts of guys?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, there's 2 things. One, you'd constantly just be learning off those guys. Craig Lambert was a massive influence for our young players. Him and his wife, Melissa, not only from an off-field point of view in getting us around and making us feel welcome and safe and loved in a new environment, but also, Lammy was so passionate about the craft and the technical aspects of the game. So, yeah, we definitely took a lot there. Guys like Voss, Lappin, Ackermanis, Sean Hart, who was one of the toughest players and most disciplined and team-orientated players that I've ever played with. Craig McRae from the perspective of a small forward. But probably a really big one was for me, and where I consider myself lucky, was I went to Brisbane the same year as a guy called Simon Black, who's just been obviously introduced into the AFL Hall of Fame. But Blackie came the same year as I did, and Blackie was just an unbelievable trainer and competitor. And it was a little bit like watching him. I mean, I know you talk about trying to model yourself on older players, and there was definitely a lot of that. But watching him, it was like, geez, if I can't get to this intensity and this level, then guys are just going to go ahead of me. And he was one who probably pushed me to another level, because you got this guy who you come in with who's the same age, who was just 110% on everything. And just you saw the result, I guess, of his career. Just a fantastic player and an even better person. And Shermo would attest to that. Just a person that is so humble for what he's achieved in the game.
Yeah, 100%.
I guess on the back of that now, Lukey, obviously you've had a decorated career, mate, and it's a real you're an ornament of the game and everything that you've achieved, premierships, you've been at the top of your game for a long period of time, and now obviously in the coaching game. Now, obviously, you've done something in terms of what I like to call the art of consistency. You've played at that level for a long period of time. Just give us a rundown of, is there anything that you did to prepare for the game? Obviously, recovery was massive, as we all know, in the AFL system. But is there anything that kept you at that level for a long period of time that you can just share with us a little bit, mate?
I love a superstition on here. So if you got any superstitions, because I know Shermo used to drink the same, buddy. What'd you have, Shermo? Oh, yeah, actually,
Gatorade and water.
Gatorade and water. Same amount every week.
No, it's a good one, mate. I appreciate your comments about being an ornament. It'd be a pretty small ornament if I was an ornament of the game. But I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, training was just a massive one for me, and also just consistency of how I lived my life, how I trained, how I dealt every day with people. That was a big one for me, and I believe that all those things led to consistent performance. So, it was a multitude of things. But yeah, it's not only what you're doing on the field and at training, but it's your off field habits. It's the way you eat. It's the way you sleep. It's all those things that I guess we call one percenters. That I'm trying to preach now to our players at Carlton Footy Club. That add up, and everything you do, you got to do with purpose, and that was massive for me. If anyone could say, that I was played at a consistently high level throughout my career, that's the biggest compliment that anyone could ever pay me, because of what goes into to being able to create that. So I appreciate your comments.
No, absolutely, mate, and that's and that's a credit, because obviously I'd seen that firsthand myself. But obviously on the other side of it now, your coaching career. Let's just dive into a little bit about that, mate. Now, you ended your playing days down at GWS. Just talk us through that move, how that transpired, and how you found the GWS boys down there in Sydney.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, if with 2 years to go in Brisbane, if anyone had said that I'd play for another club, I probably would have laughed them down. But I guess what basically happened is Vossi was the coach at the time, and basically the decision was made that that I probably wasn't the player that was going to take the club forward. We had a lot of young guys who were starting to play some really good senior football, and that was fine. I'd had some really good, honest conversations with Vossi, who I consider to be a really good friend of mine, and there was no surprises or definitely no animosity towards me, the club or Michael, and then it was a question of what's the next stage for me, and more importantly, what's the next stage for my family and my career. So the GWS opportunity came up. I guess to be able to go and work, with some of the most talented young players in the country is what really appealed to me. I'd always had a really good relationship with the younger players at the Lions, and always considered myself to be looking out for them and have empathy towards them and what they've gone through, as I had done when I moved to Brisbane. These young players, GWS, were moving from interstate to start a new club in a non-football state or part of Australia. So, there are a lot of things that I felt that I could add value to there, and the opportunity came up to play for a year, which was great. To say that I played with guys like Jeremy Cameron and Toby Green, Steve Canelio, the list goes on. Nick Haynes was just fantastic, and to be part of their development in the early days was really special. And then after that, I stayed there for 4 years and did a number of different things. I coached the backs for a couple of years, which a lot of people might be surprised at. And then I coached the midfield to finish for a couple of years under Leon Cameron, who was fantastic for my development as a coach. And I also had Kevin Sheedy and Mark Williams in the early days, and Al McConnell, who's a really, recognised coach who's been part of the Cape for a long time, was also there to provide guidance. So, yeah, I've had some great mentors, and I thought it was a really, really good footy club. I feel a bit sorry for GWS at times. They sort of always get potted a bit, especially down south in Victoria, about everything they've been given. But those players, they went up there as kids. You don't have a choice where you're drafted to, and what they've basically done is they've gone there and they've created their own environment. They've accepted it. They've done more than anyone to grow the game in Australia, because that area in Western Sydney, is a 20-year project. Like, to get out and kind of like we had to in Brisbane, Shermo, you need to get out and you need to do the clinics and really get yourselves out there. I think that the football public really should be taking their hats off to those players and the club for what they've managing to be able to do.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And just before we go more into your coaching stuff, at Brisbane, obviously, across your whole career, you played 300 games, like over 300 games. That's a lot of football. I have to ask about the 3 premierships you played in, because I just want to sort of get a inner sanctum view on what it was like over those 3 years and winning the premierships. We need you to give us a big wrap of who carried on a bit in the celebrations. What was it like around the club?
I think we all had our moments. No, it was a special time. It's definitely a special time of my life, not only for the players involved, but I mean, it's not just the players that make good football clubs. It's the staff, the members and supporters. It's the families. It's the people all up really that make good football clubs. So yeah, it was a great reward for effort. We just had a group that would just constantly push each other to new levels. I reckon 01 was a little bit of disbelief, like it tended to come around pretty quick, and you sort of always play to win one and be part of something with a team and guys that you come and work with every day, but you probably never really think it's going to happen. So that was a bit of disbelief. I reckon the next one was relief, 2002, because we were the best team for the whole year. And we just beat Collingwood. It was a cold, wet day that we really battled and pushed and they pushed us to the line, and Acker bobbed up and kicked a really good goal towards the end that everyone knows pretty well with an injury, which so that was a little bit of relief. It was like, thank God that's over. And I think the last one was just belief, because we weren't the best side anymore in 03 or 04 when we made it again, but we just had this belief in ourselves that if we come up against quality opposition in big games, that we could get the job done. Everyone understood their roles, and that's just the way that we approached our footy. In terms of guys that carried on, I think there was a fair few, but Martin Pike was one of the great ringleaders. He was pretty happy to remind everyone that we'd only won 3 and he'd won 4. Obviously, he won one at North Melbourne. I think he came to Lorimer a few years ago for a Sportsman's Day, Shermo, and he was fantastic. But one of the great characters of the game. But yeah, it was a fantastic period, and one that we'll really look back on and just enjoy so much.
G'day guys, a quick reminder, go and check out our friends at Sports Gear Oz on all socials. They're selling player issue jumpers in the following teams: GWS Giants, Gold Coast Suns and St Kilda Saints. They're really good at helping you find the piece that might finish off your collection or give you a good reason to start one. I've dealt with them a few times before myself, and they're cracking fellas, and they'll help you out down there. Also guys, if you mention the Red Vest podcast when making a purchase before August 2nd, you'll receive free delivery. That's right guys, free delivery on all orders. Make sure you go and check them out, and a quick shout out to them.
Yeah, mate, I've got a little bit, like you went to the be the head coach of the AFL Academy, mate. So just, you've seen a lot of young talent over your time. Is there one guy that just stands out head and shoulders above the rest for you?
Oh, not really. I think there's a lot. I mean, I consider myself fortunate to have worked in that program, and I don't know what the future of that program is going forward. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of changes to our pathways in our state league competitions, but over the years, I consider myself really lucky. And I really thought that the year that Sam Walsh, Connor Rosie, Bailey Smith, the King brothers, Isaac Rankin, who we haven't seen yet, who's just a fantastic talent. That year that they came through, I thought was just a really special year. In terms of the character of the players and also the quality of footballers. And I think those two things come hand in hand a fair bit. They were just an amazing group to be able to work with. And, in our program, Sam, I guess I'm working with him now, which is fantastic. And he's just a super special young man, but he won most of the awards. We have a few different awards that we have. And I guess the most impressive thing was we never felt like we had to influence the voting. The players always voted for them. And we just trusted the players to be able to vote for the right person. There was no jealousy amongst them, and it was all they wanted to do every time they came into camps was make each other better players, and they were all happy if someone else got acknowledged as winning the award. Like, they were really good team-orientated people too. So, Jack Lukosius was in that year. It was just a Jai Caldwell. It was just a fantastic year to be involved in. Then the following year, I didn't think the group was as talented, but we just had some players who just had amazing work ethics and spent so much time in improving their game and looking to make themselves better, like Matt Rowell and Noah Anderson and Connor Butterick and these guys that you're seeing at the Suns at the moment. So that was a really, really impressive year too. Hayden Young and Caleb Sarong have played already for Fremantle. So, lucky to have dealt with a number of different players and to be part of their development at the start of their development is pretty impressive.
Yeah,
With your coaching, did you played under Sheeds at Giants, didn't you?
Yeah, I did for a year. Yeah.
Okay. So with your coaching, are you a relaxed sort of coach in terms of giving feedback and letting people know how they're going? Or are you do you get a bit fired up sometimes? You look like a relaxed character.
I'm pretty calm. I think the most important thing, for me in particular, but I don't know. I think most coaches, are taking this into consideration. Is just to remember how hard the game is. If the game was an easy one, then everyone would be playing it. But it's not an easy game. Mentally, it's a tough game because there are a lot of systems that are involved. Probably too many systems at times for some. And physically, it's a hard game. You're running 14K a game at the moment, 16, I reckon, when the game's 120 minutes. At the moment, it's 100. You're running about 14, and you're getting hit at the same time. So it's a run and wrestle game. So never forget how hard the game is when you're coaching players. And I think, if I had to say anything about my coaching, I think the players that I look after probably appreciate, that when I am coaching them, that I'm not judging them from seeing football stuff. Not judging them as a person, firstly, and also when I am trying to teach them and educate them, I'm also taking into consideration how hard the game is. But the other point for me is also that I need to tell them because I want them to be great. I just don't want them to be good. So if you're seeing stuff that is marginal, you need to be able to tell them because if you don't, then you're probably doing them a disservice. But when you're telling them, I think it's important that they also come up with the solution, because as coaches, and Shermo would have found this with his coaching, we're not out there to be able to provide solutions during the games. We can send the runner out occasionally, but they need to be making decisions on the spot, and the more tools we can give them to make those decisions under pressure, obviously, the better coaches and leaders we're going to have.
Yeah, definitely. So with the coaches you had in Lee Matthews and Kevin Sheedy, in your career, it's a bit different today in terms of how coaches react to certain things, but did you ever see a pretty massive spray, or did you ever cop one yourself? I reckon you would have flown under the radar a bit. I reckon you would have been safe.
I've copped my fair share. I'd probably agree, but I do have a little bit of a cheeky side, which can often get me into a little bit of trouble. I remember Lee. I turned one over at training, and Lee went through a period where if you turn one over, he'd send you off to the back oval because he was trying to lift the standard of training. So, I remember getting sent to the back oval a fair few times in my early days at Brisbane. But yeah, it's part of the game. It's probably not the go-to method nowadays of coaching, because all it does, I think players realise when they make mistakes, but all it does for them is creates more anxiety than what we need. What we need players to do nowadays is to be able to be composed, to be able to think their way through situations, and then be able to execute. So the only time that I will probably go off at a player is if I think it's needed to lift that player's intensity.
Yeah.
If they're lacking intensity or effort, or if they do something and just check out of the game, and I need to get a message across, and the way to do that is to raise your level a little bit. But otherwise, I think we all know when we're doing things right and we're doing things wrong most of the time.
100%.
Obviously too, mate. Next point, obviously you've worked with a lot of talented youngsters, and you obviously with your new role at Carlton is probably quite similar with it being the head of development over there. Now, mental health is so prevalent in today's game and today's society, and we find that a massive issue. Just give us a rundown of what your thoughts are and some of the things you might have seen, and some of the structures that Carlton Footy Club puts in place to deal with these issues.
Yeah, it's a good question. It is a really, really important part of what we do, and an important part of life now. We're really fortunate at Carlton Footy Club that we've got some great resources. We've got a player development manager by the name of Lillian O'Sullivan, who's just a fantastic sounding board and support for the players, and also a psychologist by the name of Tara Kavanagh, who understands, the mental aspect from a performance point of view and from a well-being point of view. And those things are pretty interrelated at times. So, but I think it's important now, and one of the best things about footy clubs is that the duty of care doesn't just rest with those two people. It's with our coaches, it's with our staff, it's with our players and friends, and educating families. So, it's an all-inclusive program in terms of the structures and support mechanisms where we try and put around the players. But as I said before, it's really, really important, to separate, the on-field from the off-field, in terms of your performance as a player doesn't define you as a human being, or make you any lesser of a human being or worse human being. So, we're really big on that. We're all different, and we need to make sure that we embrace each other's differences. And I think, that's really been shown by Richmond Footy Club, who have done a fantastic job in embracing their players for who they are. And as we can see, they've had a lot of success out of the back of doing that.
On that as well, with in your playing days, was there things that you really struggled with in terms of, I guess, when you copped feedback, or if you ever, I'm tipping you probably wouldn't have got dropped too many times, if not at all.
Enough.
Few
Yeah.
times, yeah.
Clearly.
How do you respond with that sort of thing? Because even in local football, like if you have a shocking game, like it's pretty for some people who actually give a shit about footy, like it's pretty mentally straining. Like, how do you deal with something like that? And is there advice you give to players that you coach now to, I guess, help them in the way they respond to being dropped or having a shit game?
Yeah, definitely, Connor. I mean, the first one is, as I've said, who you are and your performance as a footballer doesn't define who you are as a person. Like, most people are really good people, especially around footy clubs. So, you're still a terrific person. You just need to focus going forward on this, and this. I think the conversation's an interesting one because you need to teach the players to see their room for improvement or their areas of growth as opportunities. This is an opportunity to make you a better footballer. Like, you're a good footballer now, but this is an opportunity to take your game to another level. So embrace that, because imagine what it can look like once you do take your game to another level, and we do work on these things. So that's definitely one thing. We've had young Sam Philp who got left out of the side this week, and he's just a terrific kid. Like one of the best kids I've worked with in terms of his work ethic. The way he embraces feedback. And I guess the message to guys like that is you got one of two options. And Sam wouldn't be like this, so we don't have to worry about Sam as much. But you can go back and you can sook it up. And who's that going to affect? It's going to affect, firstly, you, because you're not going to be able to put your name up again if you're in that mood or your attitude's like that. And it's also going to affect your team. But if you go and you have a really good attitude, then it's going to influence you in the right way, because they're going to have a look at you and they're going to say, geez, he's one who's just got a great attitude and great character, and we're going to look to go with him again because of the way that he carries himself. So, it's just continuing to educate around those things. But I reckon that first one about seeing the feedback as an opportunity rather than, something that's a negative, which is probably 10 years ago, is really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. And now you go, Sean.
Sorry, guys. And probably the big one there too is before you give strong feedback too, you need to have a relationship, especially with kids nowadays. Probably wasn't as relevant for us 10 years ago, but if you don't have a relationship with them and you don't show that you've got genuine care for them, then it's really hard to be able to give them, solid feedback. Whereas if you do, then they know that the feedback's coming from a really good place and that you want the best for them. So, that's a really important part of it too.
Now, Gilsey, unless you have anything, mate, I'm going to go into some real fun stuff now.
That's what I was just about to throw it into. I was
What
going
do
to
you
say
reckon?
that. Yeah, go for it.
Rightio. So we've talked a fair bit about footy. Now we're going to do a little segment like we call a bit of quick fire questions, Lukey. So I'm going to give you, the idea is I'm going to give you 10 questions, and I just want you to reel off the first thing that comes to your mind, mate. All right?
Oh, geez. Yeah, we'll see how we go. I'm not the quickest thinker.
You ready, mate? Right, here we go. Here we go. Black or blue?
Simon Black.
What about the
Cat
blue?
or dog?
Cat or dog? Definitely a dog.
Premier League or NBA?
You know the answer to that one, Worm. EPL.
Go Southampton. Greatest mentor?
Greatest mentor? My father, Kevin.
Awesome. Greatest achievement?
The premierships. Do I have to separate them?
You can if you want, mate. Up to you.
I'll go 0-1. I'll go 0-1.
0-1. Rightio. Funniest teammate?
Martin Pike, Dill McLaren.
Yeah, Dill was pretty funny. Favourite food?
Oh, geez. I'll go Japanese.
I do remember that nice little Japanese joint just down the road from your farm there. Better cook and eat her yourself?
Nah. She's way better. Yeah. more, I shouldn't say this, but more practice. More practice.
Oh. Yeah. Best player you've played with?
Black and Voss. But I'll go Black because he's my mate. Voss is my mate too, but Blackie's my mate.
Yeah. Gotcha, mate.
He's my boy blue.
And last one, your best talent away from footy?
I would have said ping pong. That's a tough. I don't have too many. As Craig Lambert said, without footy, you wouldn't be much. So I'll say ping pong, but only when my eyes in and my backhand's half going.
I was about to say, mate, we did an episode the other week about the ping pong tournaments we used to have at the club. Now, you couldn't beat Daniel Bradshaw, could you? He was just an absolute freak on the table tennis table. Now,
I beat him a few times. I think my best game was better than Brady's, but it's funny those ping pong tournaments. Blake Caristella was a good player, if you remember, but he always used to bring his own bat in. And up until last year, he thought that I snapped his bat, but I think it was Dylan McLaren. But last year, we were having a drink and he accused me of breaking his ping pong bat because he had this special one that put spin on it. So we had a bit of a blue about it, and finally he realises that I would never damage anyone's property.
One last thing before we wrap it up today, mate. I do have to ask because I got a bit of intel off you from Shermo. Shermo, obviously I said about the Gatorade and water. He said you used to eat especially Special K and ham and beetroot rolls. Was that before a game or just every day?
Well, Connor, I might have been ahead of my time because now I hear that they're drinking beetroot juice for cramp. So
They are correct.
I was just ahead of my time. Yeah. So no, I did. I was pretty particular. Same socks, same jocks.
Yeah.
Used to run out. I used to run out last. Sherman and I were probably fighting each other to run out last.
Yeah.
No, there are a couple of things that are a little bit psycho, but yeah, we got there. I call them routine.
Yeah, and I was the same. I think everyone's got to have their pre-rituals and routines pre-game. It's just but Lukey was very organised in the way he prepared. That's one thing that stood out to me, mate.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Gilsey, over to you, mate.
All right, mate. Well, I think that's going to do it for today, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Luke, thanks for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure to hear about your career and some of the things you got up to at both the Lions and the Giants. And it's good to hear what you're doing now, mate, and all the best with that in the future.
Thanks for having me, boys.
No worries. Thank
Go
you.
Blues.
Thank you.
Go
No,
Blues.
go Saints. See you, lads.
See you,
All the
boys.
best, mate. See you, mate.
There you have it, guys. Episode 11 with Lukey Power. What a great insight it was. Seeing about his playing career and what he was doing at the Brisbane Lions and GWS Giants and what he's doing now in the coaching aspect of the game. And also what it was like living with you, Shermo. On to next week, guys. We've got a few big announcements coming. Make sure, as always, you stay tuned. And also, at the moment, please stay safe and look after yourselves. And all the best. Cheers, guys.